So I just woke up. These are the two containers I'm considering using. What you're gonna need to repot a cactus is obviously a cactus. This is, I think it's called like Kunza. I don't think that's right. It starts with a K, and it's like degraded limestone pebbles, I think. And then we've got, this is my cactus soil mix. It's, I would say, at least 75% inorganic and 25% organic. The ratio might not be 100%. Even when you have the bag like this, you'll find that the organic is like a more fine powder, and that settles between the inorganic stones, and that will have a tendency to kind of fall down into the bag and be more towards the bottom, whereas your stones are lighter and they'll go towards the top. So sometimes give your soil mix a good mix, open it up, and then what I like to do is I'll choose a container. I'm probably, because it's an Aztecium, I'm gonna opt for a clay container so that it dries. The clay has a wicking effect. When you water it, it absorbs moisture, but at the same time, unlike the plastic, it allows moisture to evaporate out the clay pot. Whereas this, it's like a sealed environment. There's airflow from the bottom and the top, and that's kind of how the aeration goes in. This just helps a little bit more if you're having problems with root rot, or you want your cactus to dry out a little bit quicker. I would go with a clay pot. If you want them to stay wet a little longer, I'll go with plastic. So going with the clay pot, take a scoop of our soil and you fill up the bottom of your clay pot, about that much. Now you take your cactus. This is the one with the little root. You might not be able to see it, but that's the little root right there. I'm not entirely sure how the angle is on this video. I could have had like the whole first bit of this video all messed up. I don't really know. But what I'm gonna do is get a placement of where I want it. That looks just a little low for the soil. So I'll top it off just a little bit more. And then put this very carefully . So there's bumps and stuff in here. What I'm trying to do is match the contour into here. So I'm pushing down the side, making sure that side's a little bit higher so all the soil comes into contact with the bottom of the cactus. You be very, very careful so that you don't destroy that fresh, brand new root tip. To me, that looks pretty well perfect. And what you can do, you can go ahead and top dress with a little more soil around there, or you can top dress with something like a degraded limestone. What that does, it adds the lime if you don't already have it to your soil, which is good for alkalinity if I'm not mistaken, and it also gives it a little more of a clean appearance. So you go from something like this to something like this. So instead of having something that looks a little more natural, you can tell that the cactus doesn't really stand out as much. Whereas something like this, because of the limestone around it, it stands out quite well, which is nice. It's a little more, in my opinion, it's a little more clean. The cactus stands out a little bit better. And it's a little bit more appealing for the eye, but you do what works for you. it's always going to end up being the best. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to top this with the degraded limestone real quick. And what I like to do with that is I'll find something like a card typically and just kind of sprinkle it on with the card, or if I can't find a card, I'll just use this again. And I'm basically just putting this around the plant so that it doesn't have anywhere to really go. Something you want to be careful at this point, and I know it's kind of like a no-brainer, it's probably obvious, I shouldn't have to say it, but you want to be very careful that you don't knock over your cactus when you're repotting them. It happens a lot more than you'd think probably, and if you end up knocking over your cactus, it's not the end of the world. These things are pretty hardy, but at the end of the day, you know, you're gonna end up knocking this thing over. There's a chance you could damage it, you know, mess up the roots, all sorts of different things. So that's the last thing you really want to do. You work so hard to get these roots, and then you're not breaking them off. You're gonna feel pretty bummed out when that happens, if it happens. And what I'm doing is I'm doing this tapping thing. I don't see a lot of other people do it, but I like to do it to settle the soil. I put your finger on the very bottom where that hole is, so the actual the organics, which is like, it's like worm castings and peat moss and a couple other things, that will, because it's so fine, it'll slowly pour out of the bottom, and you want it nice and cohesive all throughout your soil. Depending on where you're from as well, you might not require having such a inorganic mix. Depending on where you're from, it may be more beneficial. Give it a little bit of a blow off. It may be more beneficial to have a soil that's a lot more organic. Like I've seen in Thailand, they can grow in like straight peat moss and a little bit of perlite, whereas like in Canada, I would need to have like heaters on and have my humidity quite low, just like almost at zero, pulling out all the moisture out of the air for that to even be a possibility. And it's one of those things where it's like, if your climate's a certain way, try to gear your setup around your climate. Don't try and, you know, optimize for habitat per se, because that might not always be the best option for you. I think also going on to some of the forums, the cactus forums, and asking people who are, you know, botanists or who have a lot more experience with cactus, ask them about, you know, if you're in my area, what's a good setup? What should I be doing? So this guy, we're gonna be leaving him just like this. This is exactly how I want it. Looks super beautiful. Amazing Valdezi. There's a root on there, so we know it's gonna continue to push out that root. What we wanna do is usually wait about 2 weeks before you water. This thing it's been months and months, and it's finally pushed out a root. Typically I would wait the 2 weeks, but for this guy, I think we're gonna be okay to go ahead and give it a water. I hope I don't end up eating my words, but my worry is it's been taking all this time to push out that root. I'm worried that what's going to happen is I let it dry and that root tip's going to dry out. Because these guys don't readily re-root, that'll be an issue. So if I water it sooner than later, what's going to happen is that root's going to swell up, seek the moisture, branch out, and just do its thing, just like the rest of these guys. Also, the reason why you want to wait 2 weeks typically, it has more to do with the fact that there's a possibility in the repotting process that you accidentally damaged the root, and a damaged root will almost always cause root rot. Almost always. Doesn't happen 100% of the time, but more often than not, if your roots are damaged and you give your cactus a water, it can cause rot. Which obviously isn't ideal. Especially some of these cactus go for hundreds of dollars. So like this guy right here, I don't know, this is maybe a $50 cactus. Now that it's on its own roots and it's a Valdezi, maybe double that. I've seen some that are just a solo head about this size that go for $250 sold, no problem. So there's quite variability on the price. I would say a lot of the times prices are contingent on what people are willing to pay at that time. I wouldn't say, oh, because somebody bought this for $1,500, you know, 6 years ago, that's what the price is today. It'd be kind of unrealistic. It's the price of a plant is always dictated by the current market. Just to show you guys what happens when you accidentally drop a cactus. So this is what it should look like, nice and full. But because I dropped it, it has all this damage now that it's soaking up, and now it's trying to push out a root still. But this was pristine, and I literally just dropped it on the floor, and now that's all that, the whole side sunken in, and it could continue to keep sinking in and end up rotting. If it's healthy and there's no, you know, systemic rust in there, it should be fine. But there is a probability that this just won't take and it'll end up wasting away. Which isn't the end of the world. I think that concludes everything. It's a beautiful repotting. I'm gonna bring this guy right into the grow tent. There's a good spot for him. So what I like to do, that's not gonna be its forever home. I try to keep things grouped together. This guy should realistically be back here. This should be in the front and yada yada, but I'm gonna move this over. That's, or what is it? Aerocarpus retusus. With an Aerocarpus retusus. And then there we go. Now all I need is a Hintani. So, beautiful. Got an Aztecium Valdezi, an Aztecium Rhetori, and then an Aztecium Hintani, Valdezi, and Rhetori. Oh, sorry. Yeah, that looks a little nicer. Awesome. Okay, well, I think that concludes the repotting video of the cactus. I'm sorry for if it's not very professional. I didn't have it really structured. There's no script to my videos. Just woke up, so I probably look like, you know, I brushed my hair with a purple balloon or something like that. But yeah, it was a great time to do the repotting of that. I've been super excited to reroot this. I was, through the research that I've done and looking up all the different things that I've looked up, it said that more often than not, the rerooting of the Valdezi, it's not viable for a large scale production. So like I wouldn't be able to, I could definitely graft these all day long. They'd be fine. I could sell those grafts, no problem. But to graft them, grow them bigger, degraft them, root them, and then sell them, it's not a viable process because the roots, it doesn't readily root. There's other species like Capiapoa, which also don't readily reroot. And then there's other species like Lophophora which they'll root off of a little freaking sliver, like just a little root fragment. They'll start pushing out ahead and growing like crazy. They can grow from like barely anything, which is really cool, but not always the case. If a plant's been grown in a way where it's been babied its whole life, the second it faces a little bit of adversity, it's gonna die. It's kind of like people. Yeah, that concludes it. Love you all. Thanks for watching and take care. Okay, so just to recap, I wanted to say that when you're repotting your cactus, there's a good probability that you're gonna damage the roots, especially on a cactus that has more roots. If you're, going from something like this and you're getting all, okay, a good example, you'll buy a cactus and it's grown in like a horticultural environment, so they'll have soil like this, and that's not necessarily ideal for all cactus. This is a Luchinbergia principis. They can be watered more frequently and they can handle it, the soil, that soil, even in my tent environment, whereas something like Aztechium, I wouldn't even play with that. These guys require a minimum of 80% inorganic, 20% organic, and they can only be watered once a month. If you water them more, these guys are notoriously difficult it's like considered one of the most difficult cactus to grow, apparently. I don't know how true that is. But yeah, so repotting a cactus, you want to wait on these slower growing kinds that are they're a lot more sensitive. You want to wait roughly 1 month after repotting, so that there's no damage on the roots. They are able to heal everything, and that when you water, there's going to be more root growth. Whereas if there's, like I said, if there's any root damage and then you water, there's a high probability that will turn into root rot and it'll go systemic and kill your whole cactus, especially considering that a lot of the water, depending on where you're getting your water from, there can also be like small amounts of like rust in there. So that's also something you want to kind of worry about, is where you're getting your water from. Like a distilled water is always probably a good idea, but natural spring water, and then you add you're gonna add a cactus food, and you can add it at full strength and feed it every single time. A lot of people think that you need to be sparing with the cactus food or feed at half strength, but the stuff is so weak in the first place, in my opinion, that it's just to sustain basic growth, not to drive heavy growth, in my opinion. So yes, repotting, you're gonna want about 80-20 organic to inorganic. This is for cactus like Areocarpus, Aztechium, Lophophora. They require some kind of lime in there. It just helps with the growth. It helps with the soil pH and corrects and stuff. If you have a drier environment, you can get away with these, depending on the cactus, depending on your soil. If you are worried about your cactus not drying out quick enough, I'll go for a clay pot. They do hold moisture in the clay when you're watering them, but they also evaporate that quite quickly, like if you actually pay attention to what they look like. And also the quality of the water. If you're using some hard water, when the clay pot dries, you'll see all these hard water stains all over. And if you're using something like a distilled or like a natural spring water, a lot of the time it's not going to have that build up, or it won't build up as quickly. When you're trying to root your cactus, you're going to want to put them, you don't have to, but I would suggest putting them over water, using something like a Pro Mix stem root powder. If you're really worried about the speed of your rooting, use rooting gel first and then dip it into the powder to soak up the residual moisture, but make sure that you've let it get hard. that after you've cut it, at least for 2 weeks, depending on the thickness, it'll need to go longer. Depending on the cactus species, it may need to go longer, but usually 2 weeks, and then that's when you can start putting them over the water, or you can alternatively put them in soil and give it a very sparing water. I find that making sure that you have roots first and then planting it, for me, just tends to work out a little bit better, but it's not always what you have to do. So I think that covers everything. 80-20 in inorganic to organic. Water with fertilizer every time you water about once a month. If you've repotted a cactus that you're not totally sure if there's going to be root damage, or even if you are sure that you didn't damage the roots, it's always good practice when repotting a cactus to wait at least minimum 2 weeks before giving it a water. The roots should be fine, and like honestly, in hindsight, thinking about it, the roots that have been pushed out will probably even grow a little bit further into the soil. But if you're super worried about it, you can give it a water at a high risk to your cactus actually dying. And yeah, I think that's pretty well all. Some of the environmental factors you're going to be considering are, you want really nice airflow. Okay, just to do a quick recap, you're going to want your soil to be 80-20, inorganic, organic. If you are in a drier environment, you can go with all plastic pots. If you're worried about the how quick things are drying, go for clay pots or terracotta. This is always nice for top dressing. There's also something called academa, I think, and it's like a clay that's that it holds moisture. It allows for cactus to grow really well. It's similar to this, but it breaks down differently. This stuff's I think degraded limestone. It has a Japanese name, so I'm not entirely sure what it is. This has a mix of all sorts of different things in it. There's perlite, pumice, different kinds of lava stone, dolite or something, like dolomite or something like that, like the one that's diatomaceous earth before it gets crushed into powder. And that's to keep out pests, like soil-borne pests. I think there's a little bit, very minuscule amount of these little fertilizer beads. You'll see them. Just a very tiny amount of them, but I like to have some slow release in there too. Not necessarily needed for cactus. You can get away 100% with this. When you're feeding, feed every time with something like a Schultz 277, full strength. Water about once a month. When you water, make sure, I always like to water. I'm gonna make a video later today showing you guys how to do it, but when you water, you have a container and you dip the bottom of the cactus pot into the water, and you allow it to wick up into the soil, and then when you see the water at the top here, you don't want it to engulf your cactus. You pull it out of the water, give it a couple shakes to get all the drips out, and you move on to the next one. And what that does is it preserves the wool on your cactus. That keeps it nice and fuzzy if you're into that. I like coming in here when I'm really stressed out and just touching a cactus. You're gonna want good airflow. Keep an eye on your relative humidity and your temperature. You don't want your temperature to drop too low or go too high. And you also don't want your relative humidity to go too high also, because that can cause your cactuses to dry out a lot slower. But the airflow really helps with the drying process. And then yeah, you want to make sure that you have good adequate lighting on a good timer. I think mine's 16 on, so that's 16 hours of the day that this is just on, giving them good light, which is nice for photosynthesis, and that's why everything seems to be doing All right. But yeah, like I said, I wish you all the best. Have a great day, guys. I'm gonna be posting a few videos all back to back, and yeah, let me know what you guys think. If you are interested in any kind of other videos, you'd like me to do tutorials or just talk about a specific plant, what have you, let me know. Drop that down in the comment section. Peace.